conventionally we've lived all these years where the volume of paper currency was extremely large. And one of the obvious consequences of over-dealing in cash, and I've repeatedly said this, is a cost both to the economy, to the social life, to the public morality, to even the political system. I need not elaborate because everybody understands what I am referring to. These are the obvious consequences of over-dealing in cash. My own view is that once the remonetization exercise, which is at a fairly advanced stage, is completed, and it won't take the kind of period which is being mentioned by some people, and a lot of the currency comes back into recirculation, the volume of paper currency will shrink. That's inevitable. And this will be substituted by a lot more transactions by other means. So the two obvious consequences are the banks will have a lot more money, and once within the system a lot more money comes in, the revenue in the long run will have far more money. And therefore the ability of the banks to support the economy and support growth. And if you looked at what's been happening in the last 2.5 years, notwithstanding the fact that we were the fastest growing major economy, we were the only ones clocking around 7.5%, notwithstanding all these factors, where was this growth coming from? This growth was coming from a lot of public spending, it was coming from foreign investment, and we were all introspecting that the private sector investment, the role of the banks because of excessive NPAs was somewhat inadequate.
Right.
Now those parts of the economy I think are going to be adequately dealt with. And therefore in the long run you will have a higher GDP, a higher revenue, and probably a far cleaner economy and a far cleaner public life in India.
Right. Two follow-up questions, sir, to what you have just said. With this exercise and with the money that is going to come through higher tax base, is India's fiscal problem on the way to being solved? Mr. Piyush Goyal, the Honorable Minister for Power and Coal and Mines, a warm welcome to you, sir. Is India's fiscal problem the ability to spend more on social programs, the ability to spend more on infrastructure? Is that going to be taken care of?
You see, you must first appreciate that we had adopted a particular model of spending in India. And the model before the present government came was, you announce a large spending program in the budget, and then in the month of November each year you start cutting. And the 3 previous years before this government took over, you would cut 1 lakh crores, you'll cut 1,20,000 crores each year. And obviously you don't cut from salaries and pension and defense expenditure and repayment of interest. What you cut from is developmental expenditure. Now the last 2 years are probably an exception to the system, where not only a lot more infrastructure spending has taken place, as Suresh Prabhu was just pointing out, the revised estimates last year were in excess of the budget estimates. That's on all planned developmental expenditure. And this year, having presented the second supplementary and had it cleared in the Parliament, this year it also promises to be significantly higher. And therefore, we are already on a track where we are spending more on development rather than give a lofty figure in the budget and then start cutting down in the course of the year. So we are going to spend more than what we projected in the budget. We did it last year, we are going to do it this year. And obviously, both from within the government resources, I'm candid enough to say that obviously months of November, December, where you had the currency squeeze, there will be an adverse impact. The adverse impact is no longer of the kind that you see with exaggerated estimates on television screens, but there will be some adverse impact. But once the remonetization settles down, the obvious advantages will start coming in. And obviously in the long run, And the long run, I'm not talking in terms of years, after a quarter or two, the spending is bound to increase.
Spending is bound to be increased. That should be good news for a lot of people, including many investors. But Mr. Jaitley, another follow-up point is to the clarification that was made yesterday about political parties. There has been a bit of a controversy over that. If you could explain, if you could comment on that, sir.
Well, I think this is a complete media creation. No change, and I would like you, particularly as a responsible media organization, to introspect. Has a single change being made in the last 2 months or so, or in the last 2.5 years with regard to taxation and political parties? The answer is no. Nothing has been done. So whatever was the existing system which has existed for the last 15 years is continuing. And if somebody creates a political party for the purposes of channelizing funds,
Right.
obviously the law will step in. And my own impression is that there are two parallel reactions in the country going on at the moment. First is how has the vast majority taken it? I have no hesitation in conceding that everyone, including myself, we've been inconvenienced. But people have welcomed it. Otherwise, withdrawing 86% of the paper currency and there being not a single incident in the whole country, no evidence of social unrest itself shows that people were willing to take the inconvenience because they knew it was for a better cause. This is the vast majority. And there is a small group of people in any system, right, whether it's individuals, whether it's within the corporate world or the banking world, anywhere, and these are exceptions, who try to misuse the system. Similarly, if anybody in the political system tries to misuse the system, they will exactly be dealt with in the same manner in which this other minority group of people who are trying to abuse the system will be dealt with.
Right. You mentioned this very important point about the vast majority of people, though they are inconvenienced, are supporting it. One issue that is not being debated to a great extent is the political impact of what you have announced, what Prime Minister Modi has announced on November 8th. Now, we had the by-polls on November 18th or 19th, where the BJP won a good number of seats, including places in Tripura and other places. And you had a very good result in Maharashtra. The Maharashtra CM, Mr. Devendra Fadnavis, unfortunately could not be here with us, but he had 2 rounds of legislative council polls, municipal corporation polls, and there has been no impact, and the BJP has done well. What is the lesson that you are drawing from this? Because you have a very big battle coming up in UP.
I think the lesson that I am drawing is that India today stands as an exception to what's happening in the world.
Right.
The world is becoming more inward-looking. It's difficult to find a solution to a large number of global problems. World is becoming more protectionist.
Right.
If you see the kind of popular reactions which have come in the world, whether it's Brexit or whether it's the US presidential election, Latin America, Colombia lost a referendum, should there be peace? A peace deal is rejected. That's the kind of negativism which prevails in the world. Now, if you compare it with what's happening in India and look at what's happened in the last few months, I think in the first 2 years when we were making incremental reforms day after day, a suggestion was thrown out, what about the Big Bang? So you had first the Monetary Policy Committee, then you had the rationalization of subsidies through the Aadhaar system, you then had the insolvency, you then have the GST, which is making a considerable headway, hopefully coming year will be implemented. And now you had this huge reform in the way we spend and the way we live. Today, the same columnists I find start writing, is India prepared for a Big Bang? Now, I am not going to be persuaded by either the earlier argument or this one. Since you asked the question, what is going to be the political impact? I'm certain it's going to be very positive electorally, but that's not the consideration.
Right.
One good political impact is going to be, hopefully for the future, political funding may also have to become more transparent. That's an obvious political impact. But at the end of the day, I think there is one lesson, at least people like me have learned, in order to implement a reform, there is an initial, all kinds of reactions. You have inconveniences, you have popular, unpopular reactions. Don't undertake a reform, and if you did it, then you must have the stamina and the broad shoulders for it. And therefore, a reform like this, if we take the kind of adverse reaction which comes in a column here or there for 1 or 2 months, I can assure you the future is going to be much better.
So let us look at a little larger picture. We were the largest economy till the first industrial revolution. Then came the second one, took us even behind. The third one, we missed out. Right. The fourth revolution is going to be the digital revolution. And if we can actually embrace it, can ride it, and not just see it passing by, right, we could be the real winners. Now, if you want to really bring a revolution of any kind, whether it's a revolution of changing a state, changing power structures, whatever, right, the revolution presupposes disruption. Right. You cannot have revolution without disruption. Right. That is something which is the best thing to have, but unfortunately we can never have it. And therefore, if it is a revolution which is going to be there and the digital revolution is around the corner, why not we ride it? So therefore, if you look at it in that context, that it is just around the corner, we could take benefit of that, and therefore this could be a one big step in that direction. So this is not just one-off event. Right. This is part of a much larger strategy, right, to get all transactions, many of our normal businesses to be done digitally, and whether we like it or not, that's going to be. So that's going to be the order of the day. So why not we take benefit of it? Be the first more advantage we can have. Right. And we also have another advantage, because we are not locked into a system, because we are not adopted something, we are not invested something. So large number of people in India which were unbanked, the people who didn't have any identity, so they are getting it now. Right. So the digital revolution will help us to leapfrog considerably, and this is one step in that direction. So if you look at it in that context, right, then you will see that disruptions are disproportionate to the benefit that we'll have. And therefore, I think this is some small price to be paid for much bigger benefit to be had.
Thank you, Mr. Prabhu. Small price to be paid, no revolution can happen without disruption. Actually, Prime Minister Modi has been talking over the last few weeks on how this is just the first step. This is not the end. It's probably the beginning of the end. But if I could, ask Mr. Gadkari, and if you could come in on this, you have been on the forefront of this campaign and part of the government, and lots of the roads ministry has also done. What according to you is the feedback from people? We've seen a surge in digital transactions. We've seen a lot of people adopting it, even in villages and small towns. But what according to you, is it going to be easy? Is it going to be, how do you see things panning out?
The impact of the decision in my department particularly, it's very positive. Right. Now people are giving good response for development in infrastructure. Presently we have already finalized the contract more than 4,50,000 crores. Right. And next December 8, my target is for 10 lakh crores. Now the process are moving fast, and people are giving good response for the tenders. The most problem is with the bankers because of the previous situation. There was some hesitation was there to support the infrastructure project. But I feel that today in the situation, bank has to invest in this infrastructure project, because we already solved all the problems which are complicated problems with the sectors. And if the bank are not ready, still we don't have a money problem. Right. Now the situation is good, and the impact of the decision on my field particularly, it is positive, and we don't have any problem for that.
You don't have any problems. Actually, a lot of people in India, and including many bankers and many industrialists, may not have any problems with the way the roads ministry under Mr. Gadkari has been functioning. It's one of the most successful ministries in the Modi administration. But if I could just ask you to expand a little bit on what is it, the big bang reforms or radical reforms that you have in mind to take India forward?
The problem is in the Indian administration, government administration, in banking administration, we need fast-track decision-making process. If you don't want to do it, say no. If you want to do it, say yes. But without taking any decision, 3 to 4 months, the file is only moving. This is not the correct thing. So today in my department, I have taken a decision. If the officer is not taking the decision, Now I am ready, I am started that we will take action against him. You take any decision. And most important thing is the administration. We need transparency, time-bound decision-making process, corruption-free system, and the most important thing that you have to have appropriate policies by which we can take the transparent decisions. So now, as far as the infrastructure is concerned, we are in a good position. We have changed a lot of things. Model agreement also we have changed. We discussed with the stakeholders, the bankers, the contractors, the investors. And now I feel that now this is the time for my department, and positive signals are there that we will expect good investment in the sector.
And you plan to continue the progress in the roads ministry next year as well?
Yes. Actually, I am very positive about it, and I feel that we will get good response from the investors.
Right. You've been setting pretty ambitious targets for roads construction and all that. And Mr. Prabhu has also been setting very ambitious targets. If you look at, Mr. Prabhu's ministry, for instance, he inherited a railway ministry which had seen about, 4 ministers in about 5 years? And he had a massive, difficult, complex job of turning around this ministry, a massive super tanker, and how do you turn it around? And there are a number of things that he's done, like we hear anecdotal evidence about how the stations are far more cleaner now, investment is happening, there is Wi-Fi, there is a lot of transparency, especially in the way that he probably reacts to complaints on Twitter and others. But Mr. Prabhu, now in the new scheme of things, you do have some issues about revenue collection. The freight traffic is probably not what you expect. How are you planning to raise money and take forward your projects that you have in mind?
We must first of all take cognizance of the fact that nowhere in the world you can create infrastructure from the present revenue streams of a business organization. I'm sure there are some very successful businessmen like sitting here, they could manage to do that. But normally, create infrastructure means you have to actually find out money outside of your business current stream of revenue. And therefore, infrastructure creation would necessarily require raising of debt. And if you don't raise debt, you will not be able to do that. Now, if you look at it, now this has been a typical argument made by several railway ministers before me, is that finance minister must give money. That is as if finance minister has a big problem of how to spend money, because he has so much of money that he don't know how to spend money. And secondly, again, we tend to forget that fiscal deficit means that much of the government borrowing. Fiscal deficit almost equalizes to that. That means government is also raising money from the market, and therefore borrowing is something which is sustaining also the fiscal balances of the country. So therefore, not to borrow is not a right idea to create infrastructure. So we have to actually create infrastructure from borrowing. Now, what we did, there's a chairman of LIC sitting here, and he will tell you we raised about 30 a paper, 1,50,000 crores. Some people are asking me when we said 1,50,000 crores, so very good thing you have raised 15,000 crores. I said no, 1,50,000 crores. They said very good, 15,000 crores is not small amount, but we actually raised 1,50,000 crores. But I'm saying is, that is the first big departure from thinking of the past, that to create infrastructure we need resources, and resources cannot be found only from the regular streams of income.
I could bring Mr. Goyal into the picture. He's just come in. Mr. Goyal, what are the benefits that you are seeing for your ministry? Because there have been quite a few radical steps that you have done in your ministry. What are the benefits that you're seeing going forward from the demonetization?
Well, I can clearly see that as more and more of the economy gets into the formal economy, it's obviously going to help the discoms and the power distribution setup also recover their bills more honestly.
Right.
In the past, we had instances where large steel mills,
right,
because they wanted to sell a portion of their production outside the formal economy, would have to plan that they buy the raw material in cash, they adjust the electric meters or the electric billing so that they don't reflect the full consumption, and the entire chain had to be corrupted all across.
Right.
I think one big change is in the mindset of the people. More and more people are realizing it doesn't pay to be dishonest anymore. And as we see the formal sector maturing, I think every other sector along with that gets the concomitant benefits. If we can see lower taxes across the system with more people coming under the tax net, then possibly GST rates come down, your capital investments come down, Interest rates will have an automatic impact with lower inflation thanks to black marketing or hoarding coming down. So I think this is an area where when we sit down to try and assess what will be its impact on different segments of society or different industries, our own experience is that almost everybody stands to gain. In fact, I've been interacting a lot with the trading community, the middle class, the small traders. They are facing a lot of pain in the short run. But it's that adjustment period. Particularly the younger generation amongst the trading community is very excited that if all of us have a level playing field and all of us are going to compete only on quality and good service, then it makes life so much better for everybody. I think we will be seeing now a shift from people having two wallets, a wallet which is their formal official wallet and a wallet which is their informal wallet, gradually to moving towards the digital economy, moving towards payments coming out of the banking system, recognizing that it pays to pay your taxes honestly, and that entire infrastructure in the country is going to mature in the years to come.
It's going to mature. Would you have any thoughts on private sector investment in power? And a lot of CEOs and industrialists out here and bankers. That's one area where there's a lot of progress that the Power Ministry has made in a number of areas, Uday, transmission and distribution. That's one area where private sector investment in power generation. Do you see any hope that it will revive?
Certainly. We've taken a decision only 2 days back that NTPC will lead the way and will scrap all the power plants which are more than 25 years old. In fact, Mr. Gadkari called me, I think 4 or 5 days ago, and he made this recommendation. And I think you couldn't have made a better choice than Mr. Gadkari for today's award, because he made this suggestion only 4 or 5 days ago. We quickly got NTPC to act on it. Their board informally discussed it. And 2 days back, I've announced that 11,000 megawatt, that is more than 25 years old, that NTPC continues to run. And I'm also talking to all the states. Put together in the next 5 years, this would mean almost 40,000 megawatts and being replaced with new supercritical modern plants. And during this period, it will obviously give an opening for all the other power plants to start looking at their power also having a market.
Right. Mr. Jaitley today talked about a new Indian normal. One of the things that has been bothering or occupying the minds of a lot of people, including industrialists, policymakers, media, and of course the government, is that how fast and how soon are we going to ramp up in terms of GDP growth? Going hit double-digit figures, for instance. We are already the fastest growing larger economy. If you could have some thoughts on that, sir.
Well, I think we should be realistic. And realistic in the sense that today's global environment is certainly not conducive for anyone to claim that you can reach a double-digit growth. You reach those kind of figures provided the global economy itself becomes supportive. And when you have adverse impact of the global economy on domestic economies, I think one of the big challenges is to have sufficient firewalls around yourself, reform domestically, increase investments, have structural reforms that you can move forward. And that's how we've managed to retain a 7.5% figure over the last 2-3 years when we found an extremely unsupportive global environment.
Right.
I think immediately, after the immediate impact of this decision, we get through and the remonetization is complete. For the supply chains to build up, it will take some time. And therefore, we should be able to add to India's GDP. Now, how much you are able to add, I think it's too early today to suggest. If I suggested a figure, then probably it may give credibility only to astrology. And therefore, it's better to not suggest a figure, but certainly it has the capacity to grow. And I think a lot would then depend on what happens to the external sector itself.
Right. So do you think the uncertainty or the confusion caused by what was announced on November 8, that's just a short-term blip and we will have a V-shaped recovery after, say, 6-7 months?
Obviously, the impact of it is going to be short-term. And short term because what you are going through is a currency replacement.
Right.
And once there is a currency replacement and a lot of currency which was floating loosely outside the system gets into the formal system, and as Piyush just mentioned, the informal starts merging increasingly with the formal, obviously the size of the economy itself would benefit.
Right. One final question to you, sir, before we wrap these things up. What is going to be the government's priority on the budget? Is it going to be spending on infrastructure? We're hearing a lot of talk about income tax SOPs, about new social programs.
See, I'll tell you,
The economy needs a booster shot, obviously.
it certainly needs a booster. We are all convinced that it's 7.5% is something which doesn't satisfy our requirements itself, and therefore spending more. And now that there is a long-term potential of more resources getting into the system, I think that's going to be a top priority itself. And therefore the areas where we were lacking, whether it's in terms of encouraging investment of the private sector and so on, I think these are going to be the areas which the budget should concentrate on.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.